Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Monday night in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. So first of all, again, I'm out in the Northwest this week. I forgot my professional mic, so I may sound a little different, but we're going to get through this and kind of talk about some very important changes that are coming up. I always find it useful to know where we just came from. So this map you've been looking at here as the upper level jet stream level winds from the beginning of November to the 11th. And what I really want to point out here was how strong the jet stream was coming off of Japan. It built into a small ridge that was just south of the Aleutian Islands and then dove into the western United States and then ran up here into eastern Canada. Now that particular setup gave us a trough ridge pattern that looks something like this. Okay, now you can see it. There was the trough here and a trough there and a trough in the open Atlantic. Now keep that in the back of your mind because this may be a pattern we're going to return to after the large block that's in the atmosphere now and for the next 10 plus days is gone. I think this is something you're going to see again quite soon. Okay, so from here, why don't we go to this graphic? This looks at the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation. So captured in this is the big winter storm that went through California that then ejected into the Northern Plains. It's the one that put down all the snow in the parts of Montana and then here in North Dakota and a little bit of ice south of it. We were drier throughout much of the plains, especially in the hard red winter wheat belt back down to Texas and New Mexico. We did have those storms that came racing out into parts of Texas into Arkansas, in Louisiana and Oklahoma. And then, of course, what you still have on here is Nicole. That's what's over there on the eastern side of the country. So we can kind of see who got this rain and who didn't. And since we're talking about snow at the beginning here, I would like to show you, this was the total snowfall accumulated on the 6th, 7th, and 8th. So that was just when this pattern really started to dig into the western United States. And then here is the 8th, 9th, and 10th. And that's when we saw over 4 feet of snow in parts of the Sierra Nevada, heavy snows through the Rocky Mountains, including right here around Yellowstone. And then as it got into Montana, there's a lot of 6 to 12 inches in through here, but the heaviest snow was in parts of North Dakota. Now, thinking about that, we're just going to continue to keep an eye on what's happening in the West, and it's going to take a long time for that water to get into the reservoirs, of course. It'll be next spring that we're talking about it. But I just want to make a point here that, currently Lake Shasta and Oroville, two of the biggest reservoirs, are at 31 and 29% respectively. They're normally almost 60% full pool at this point. So it's very important for us to just remember that at this particular point of the year, we are significantly lower than our historical averages. And so we just need to continue to watch throughout this winter, and we're going to talk about this winter at the end of this video and kind of another component to it that could affect what's going on in California. One of the big things we'll be watching is right now this is in the Northern Sierra precipitation district, these 8 stations that are in here. The big thing we want to know is as this year progresses, we're currently here, do we follow the average, which is what you've got shaded right there, or is it a year where we fall off, or is it something like last year, which started off so wet and then finished so dry after we got to the beginning of the new year? So these are some of the questions we're going to attempt to answer. And since we're talking about the West, I do want to show you the Bureau of Reclamation, their hydromet data set here, which shows us what are called the teacup diagrams. This is really important to look at. I'll be flying over Yakima tonight and just looking at some of the big reservoirs like Cle Elum, which is currently at 35% pool, and some of the others surrounding, which are all about that same level. We really need the snowpack to build up this year and to get into the mountains to fill in these reservoirs. Eastern Oregon might be in the worst drought conditions comparatively to other reservoirs, basins, where you see some of their largest reservoirs are almost completely empty. So this upcoming forecast we continue to kind of build on is critical for this. Now on the other side of the mountains, this is the latest soil moisture data. And remember, we have a lot of snowpack sitting here, but it's got to melt to get into the soil. So that's why you don't see changes there. It's been to the south of that, getting into the harder winter wheat belt, that we continue to see drier conditions, primarily to the west of that line. Now, over the weekend, a lot of the precipitation from last weekend and then the whole week before missed this section of the Corn Belt, but this is what happened here with Nicole really reviving soil moisture in those areas. The drought monitor released last week, we talked about it last Friday, but I just want to show you over the last month, that has been where we've seen degradation in drought. It's been in pockets in the eastern Corn Belt and the southeast. Again, a lot of this is gone now that we had Nicole go through, but there are still places throughout the Central Plains that have really not been able to return enough moisture to get to really see soil moisture values come back up and the drought monitor to start to shrink. Now you'll notice that in some of the tributaries that feed into the Mississippi, there's been some very wet conditions, and we're finally starting to see the benefits of that. I'm going to take you to the AHPS website, which shows us where the USGS gauges are. And I've been looking a lot at Memphis, so let's go right back into Memphis and take a look at the latest data here. What's interesting is that right now we're still about 11 feet below low stage, but over the next 4 or 5 days, that's expected to increase about 5 feet, the river depth about 5 feet. It'll still be 6 feet below low stage, but this is some of the early improvement that we're seeing. But you'll notice that beyond that, there is probably a drier stretch coming through much of the Mississippi watershed. And I want to talk about why that's in place. So here we go. This is our problem. We will be watching by the end of this week a large ridge build into Alaska and one build into Scandinavia. We've been talking about it for, maybe 10 or 12 days. It's a great example of how the models picked up early on a pattern. So the flow is being diverted like this. And then it dives in through the Canadian prairie, clips through the plains, and then ejects over here on the eastern side of the United States. That is a trajectory that delivers a lot of cold and very dry air to most of the U.S. It then runs back up over our ridge here. So what you end up getting is kind of cross-polar flow. The ridging goes in this direction, okay? And then the troughs go like this. And that's where the colder air is squeezed out. Sometimes in the middle of winter, when our polar vortex is more of a dominant player in the pattern, you can have the stratospheric polar vortex line up with this. And oftentimes the stratosphere is disturbed by events like this, which means we're going to have to watch out for this later on in this upcoming winter. But the net effect of that is we've got one system that's right here today, and it's going to move quickly toward New England. Then after that, it's just going to be deep troughs of low pressure orbiting around the Great Lakes that are going to deliver the snow. But the map I'm drawing on is the 3:30 or 3:20 in the afternoon map that shows where we have winter weather advisories, winter storm warnings, or strong winds on the backside. And they've increased the area here this afternoon and also added this along the spine of the Appalachians up into parts of New York. Now, on the backside, there's some fog here and very windy conditions in California. But let's go take a look at it on satellite. Now, this is just as the sun is setting right here, and you can see some of the low cloud around the eastern Great Lakes. You can see this system we're watching right in through here spin its way up. And earlier today, we saw a lot of just big snowflakes out of this. I saw several videos of those like silver dollar snowflakes. In the northwest, a lot of fog. That's a lot of fog, but you can start to see where some of the snow is in the mountains. Now, this is the low we're going to have to pay close attention to, and let's go right out now and take a look at the high-res NAM model to see where it's going to be. By 8 o'clock this evening, we're spreading snow to eastern Kansas, Missouri, getting out of Oklahoma into Arkansas, and there'll be storms in eastern Texas moving into parts of southern Arkansas and Louisiana. Then in the overnight hours, this spreads through Missouri, a lot of light snow north of it in the upper Midwest, even as far back as southeastern Montana. And then you'll see by tomorrow morning, playing through the day tomorrow, that large kind of shield of snow stretches across much of the Great Lakes states and back into the central Corn Belt. We'll take a look at snowfall totals in a second. We're going to watch the main front clear the Appalachian Mountains here. This will be on Tuesday afternoon and evening, and during that time it's spreading rain through parts of the Carolinas and Virginia. There could be some cold air damming resulting in some ice accumulation here, and then you'll notice some of the ice right up here into parts of Pennsylvania, New York, maybe over to Massachusetts we're going to have to keep an eye on. Now, on the back side of this, it's going to continue to snow, and you can see that probably one of the locations that's going to see quite a bit will be right into this area in Minnesota, but really, the lake effect regions are going to see quite a bit as well. So as we play this out through Wednesday, interesting to take note, the newest model runs are picking up on the potential for some snow squalls on Wednesday afternoon throughout parts of the Midwest. It'll also be at that time that I'll be watching for the next large Arctic front to push up against the Rocky Mountains here, and that's going to be kind of a story we're going to have to watch as well because it's going to deliver a lot of cold air. So let's go watch it with the 12Z European model. So we've already seen through Tuesday, getting out into Wednesday, and there's the moisture spreading toward the north and east. Now behind this, you're going to see flow like this in a big high, 1056 high, pushing down against the Rocky Mountains. And that's going to bring in some snow right here on Wednesday into Thursday, and very strong winds out of the north. See it right there? Coming across the northern plains. Very, very strong winds. So a lot of light snow under strong winds. And then there's just a lot of lake effect snow and scattered snow showers because the pattern is driven up into a large ridge that then dives down like this into a deeper trough. In fact, there's another piece to the trough sitting over the Great Lakes to the Hudson Bay. So that's through Friday. We play into the weekend. And what you notice is no major storm system being forecast other than the one we're dealing with that starts today and goes like this. No major storm system from then all the way through next Monday into Tuesday. It's hard to get big storm systems to form when you have such a highly amplified pattern that's putting a ridge here and a deep trough that brings northwest flow all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. It's just not the right setup to get a big system coming off the lee side of the Rockies or something hitting the west coast. So we want to know when that's going to change. We're going to answer that question in just a few moments. First of all, let's talk snow. This is the probability of accumulating at least 2 inches of snow out of this, and this would be the probability of getting at least 4. So what you can see here, there we go, is that we have the best chance at getting heavy snows on the leeward side of the Great Lakes and then into New England. Very heavy snows possible in through here up to parts of upstate New York into Maine. But notice there is a chance for 2 to 4 inches of snow coming in the backside. In fact, let's go look at the actual snowfall amounts from today's 12Z European model run. So I'm just going to play this out through Wednesday into Thursday. Let's go ahead and take this all the way out here to about a 5-day forecast. We'll leave it right there. So you can see the heavy snows on the lakes through Minnesota. Remember, my color bar starts these blues at 4 inches, but there could be a few pockets in there that pick up 3 to 4 inches of snow right in through this area. Then in New England, that's where your heaviest snow corridor is going to be, possibly right here in the Appalachian Mountains, but remember there's going to be some ice in this as well. And then that main front that comes blasting here out of the north into Montana could really add up quite a bit in the mountains if we get some upslope flow out of that. Now the temperatures, well, here's today's high temperatures on Monday. We've already experienced these. That's Tuesday. Getting into Wednesday, the big shot at cold air comes on Thursday. Look at that, coming out, sliding along the Rocky Mountains here. We're going to have some very cold mornings with this, especially on Friday morning as that cold air sinks all the way down south. So this is feeling like, this is middle of winter type temperatures here. And it just doesn't let go. That's Saturday into Sunday because this blocked pattern run is going to stick around for a while. On the low temperature side of it, I just parked it out here on Friday morning. I think this is going to be our coldest morning, generally looking across the country, especially into this vicinity. A lot of temperatures in the single digits or below 0 Fahrenheit, so very, very cold conditions. Okay, I like to focus mostly on the long-range stuff in these videos, so let's get into that discussion. And to do that, I need to start you here. So this is the European ensemble, 12Z run. It's showing you the jet stream, and you can see it's moving here, but it's broken up into that large ridge that's given us flow like that, okay? I want to know if there's anything that can push this piece out across the open Pacific and dislodge this. And the European model is suggesting that once we get out there, past next Monday and Tuesday, going toward Thanksgiving, we will see that happening. Notice that ridge is gone, and we're almost lost the Scandinavian ridge. And there's a large stretch of stronger winds that moves from the Himalayas across China, over Japan, out into the Pacific, and it kind of regains its shape right here the day after Thanksgiving in the Pacific Northwest. So this blocking pattern is going to last about 10 to 12 days. It's already a few days into it, and we're going to see it break down really after Thanksgiving. And what's important about that is the week 2 forecast is not showing drier conditions across much of the United States. Now remember, this gets you out there to the 28th. Now you notice the more active pattern coming in to the Pacific Northwest. This means systems will come in here and they will eject across the country. And as they do so, expect to see a much more active week. And that's going to not only change the precipitation pattern, but the temperature pattern as well. So let's go take a look at those temperatures, and then we'll stretch this out even further. Now, we know we're locked into cold because of that block for the next at least 7 to 10 days. So why don't we just park it right out here on the 24th. So this will be the 20th to the 24th. Now watch what happens as you get past Thanksgiving. You start to see some moderation in the pattern. And this is what happens when we start to bring the jet stream screaming out of the Pacific Northwest, diving across the country, able to draw at times warmer air up. We may also see the emergence of some sort of a subtropical ridge that sits over parts of the southeast at that time. So that's the next time the pattern's going to shift around. What's causing that shift is this. Now, what got us into it was about a week to 10 days ago, the trade winds, which have been screaming like this, well, they backed off. And when they did that, it allowed other features other than the La Niña to take over. And that's what pushed the ridge here now. And again, there's one over Scandinavia as well. Okay, those trade winds are coming back. And you can see them right now. And there's usually about a 7 to 10 day lag after when they pick up that the momentum in the jet stream starts to respond. But as we've been discussing, the blues are the trades. The reds are the westerly wind bursts in the trade winds. And where they're going to meet for the next 15 days or so is almost squarely into phase 5 or phase 6. And what you see here is that on our newest model forecast for the MJO, it's sweeping back over here into this area, phase 5 and 6. Now I'm going to show you a graphic you've seen a million times, but notice this. Remember what I showed you at the beginning? What got us into that active beginning of November was trough here, ridge there, trough here, ridge there, trough here. In fact, just to remind you, there it is. And what I'm suggesting is we could be going back to that to finish this month. Now, as that occurs, we're also going to kind of gather some information from other sources. You've primarily been looking at the European model. But the WPC has a very similar story. The last week of November, the first week of December is showing a very similar setup to what I just explained. And the long-range European model, which was just released about 30 minutes before I recorded this, also has very active storm systems entering the west, moving across the northern tier of the United States. The reason for the potential for maybe some drier conditions in through here is just because of subtropical ridging that happens. If you dig a trough into the west, you'll bounce up a ridge right in this area. But don't think that this is going to be a dry map going into the month of December. And again, the time frame you're looking at here is November 25th to December 25th. Now, let's get into the new long-range content I want to share with you. As you probably heard, NOAA released a statement saying that there's a 75% chance of a La Niña lasting through this winter. Well, December, January, February, the probability of a La Niña is about 75%. Now, I want you to understand something about this. This particular number, which again references the Niña region 3.4 sea surface temperatures, that is referring to the ocean temperatures right there in the central Pacific Ocean. And why we have to be so careful about this is just to remind you, in fact, let's just pull that up real quick here. Current ocean temperatures, there they are. You know, these temperatures are always in response to what the atmosphere is going to do. And I've made a case for a while now that I think that the La Niña is going to let go before we get fully through the month of January. I think it's going to let go at the end of December or beginning of January, which means these graphics, which are important to give us the broad scale features, may not fully represent what the atmosphere is going to do. Now, I've been presenting evidence on this. Global angular momentum is up. We've seen some strong westerly winds deep in the stratosphere that are emerging. That's part of the QBO. We've also seen a couple of other things shifting around in the Indian Ocean, like those westerly wind bursts. Our forecasts to start to back off. But I want to put together just another piece of this puzzle, because what we're thinking about here is what the midwinter precipitation and temperature pattern is going to look like. And this is all because of what I showed you at the beginning. We need drought area to shrink. We need western snowpack to build up. Now, right now, the European model says deliver the moisture across the northern tier of the U.S., give an active Ohio River Valley storm track. And one of the reasons for this, the reason why it looks like this, is partly because La Niña will be there at the beginning and fade. But the other part of this has to do with something called the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. Now, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation is a temperature pattern in the oceans, which when it's in its positive phase is cold here and warm along the west coast of North America when there's an El Nino. We don't have this. Remember, we've got this right now. We actually have the negative phase of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, where it's warm here and cool along the periphery. Now let's imagine that this temperature pattern in the oceans is maintained throughout winter. What that typically means is we would have what we've seen in the past from negative PDO time periods, which we've got a lot of data going back to 1854 on. Now you can see where we currently stand. Now what we know about this, I can show you very simply in a diagram that correlates precipitation against this. And what's important to see here is that the northern tier of the United States and a large section of the country and through here tend to be wetter. There could be risk of being dry in the southwest and maybe in the southeast. But this year, the PDO will have to be contending with the fading La Niña. And I want to know if we end up developing at some point a subtropical component to the jet to undo what the PDO typically does south. What I'm trying to stitch together for you here is that I think this winter is going to be extremely active. And this is one of the reasons why. If the PDO favors a ridge over the Aleutian Islands, We just had a ridge here for the first 11 days of November. It drove a trough into the west and systems ejected through the plains. There tends to be southeast ridging in this situation, but that doesn't necessarily mean overly dry. So if we end up getting a pattern where there's a ridge here and a trough there, it's one of those years where we tend to just have a very active U.S. storm track. It tends to build up snowpack in the west, including California. It tends to deliver a lot of lee cyclogenesis, big winter storms that show up in the plains and Midwest. And it tends to produce a whole lot more rain under warmer conditions in parts of the southeast. So this is just another piece to this puzzle we've been trying to put together, what we think winter is going to look like. Now, this all affects other places around the world as well. So let's take a look now at what's going on in South America, because the patterns we're discussing are going to affect this area as well. You're first looking at a root zone soil measure from NASA's GRACE. And up here in parts of Rondônia, it's still quite dry, but much of Brazil's major growing areas are not struggling with moisture to start things off. The problems are down in Argentina. Now, over the weekend, we saw decent moisture coming back to very limited sections of Argentina. Remember, when you get into these blues, we're talking about a ½ inch to an inch of precipitation, but this is in millimeters. In my morning report, I stated that parts of, very productive parts of Buenos Aires, getting over toward Cordoba and up along the Parna River, had missed out on this. But this was the data from the 12th and 13th. Well, right after I finished that report, they released the data from yesterday. And what we've got here is now better rainfall was observed in these areas. Now, this is going to put a bit of a Band-Aid on what's going on in Argentina in the near term, but we question what the longer-term implications are. And the new data released this afternoon suggests that while northern and eastern Brazil and even pockets of central Brazil are expected to have above normal precipitation from now through Christmas, we continue to see the model responding to La Niña, putting drier conditions farther to the south, including a very productive part of Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Rio Grande do Sul. So if there's going to be drought redevelopment, the models are suggesting it's going to be in this area, which means we're going to have to keep watch on that. By the way, all of this discussion about La Niña has really played major problems in parts of Australia. Over the weekend, they had massive storms that went ripping through there. I just want to show you something. In New South Wales, I was looking at the departure from normal in precipitation over the last 2 months. More than 90% of their wheat growing area has got 10 inches of excess precipitation. So the flooding issues that we're seeing there just continue to be a major problem. So we're gonna have to keep an eye on all of this. In fact, let's just blow this out and take a look at this whole time period from now through Christmas at places around the world. And you can see there is still better chances of above normal precipitation in parts of Australia, but this map kind of just tells us what to expect as this La Niña makes another surge here over the next few weeks. It will be after Christmas that I think we'll start to see changes in that La Niña. So we'll keep watching it. I'll report back to you, all right? Have a good rest of your week, and I will talk to you again for those who get my morning report tomorrow morning. Thanks.